I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard Knock Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard Knock Life. Comics, movies, and TV, yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective.
Looks like we're podcasting again. Dominic, you are turning me into a regular podcaster again.
Keith, you are a regular podcaster. What do you think? You took a
I
hiatus.
was out, and you pull me back in.
Yes, the podcast mafia verse needs you to keep us in line or something.
I guess so. I mean, like I said, last week I thought it was a one-off, but you continue to have thoughts. So
Well, okay, Al Pacino. Wait, did you even intro the podcast yet? Or
yes, welcome to Hard Knock Life. We're going to do things differently now because I don't give a shit anymore. But what I do give a shit about are your thoughts, Dominic. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, I'm Dominic and Keith. Hi.
Your thoughts on the DC universe, because that's how you pull me in. I love talking about DC. So
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, let's frame it a little bit. Last week, when we were talking about sports, we eventually started talking about your feelings on this iteration of the DC universe sort of ending. And I don't know if we're calling it official names or whatever, but like set up basically like the thing that sort of ended with Aquaman and the thing that is going to begin in a year or so, or 2 years.
With Superman. Yeah, and for what it's worth, before we get to the main thing, I should say last week I said I had not watched Aquaman and had all these feelings about the end of the DCEU. So I watched it in the 7 days since we last spoke to one another. And one of the reasons I didn't watch it was that I it just had no appeal. Even though it was like I was lamenting the end of the universe, I just didn't feel like going to the movie theater, to watch this particular film. Okay. It's the only DCEU film I had not seen in the theater. But it's streaming now. It's available on all platforms to rent.
This is, I guess, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom.
Lost Kingdom, Aquaman 2.
Poor title is my main problem. Very generic title.
Yeah,
Lost Kingdom. Great.
But I'll say this. I mean, surprisingly, I kind of dug it.
Good.
Weirdly. Kind of dug it more than the first one.
Good. Okay.
Which
I haven't seen it yet.
For so much. So, yeah, I mean, it's still not a good movie. And it's a weird way to end this multi-pronged universe you've created over the last 10 years. It's no end game, which we've discussed and will discuss. But it was fun. There's a bunch of stuff between Patrick Wilson and Jason Momoa that I really like, kind of like the brotherly comedy, buddy cop stuff, which looked stupid in the trailers and is still stupid, but entertainingly stupid.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's very relevant to what I want to talk about because the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game had the severe problem of looking stupid in the trailers or looking a certain way that people didn't like. But just to set up the whole framing, along those lines, you were talking about feeling like a little disappointed inside that this section of the DC filmed universe didn't quite get its sum up Endgame-y moment. And say what you want about Endgame, but Endgame brought a thing to a close. It completed the first huge event of the Marvel Universe. On the DC side, well, we did get Justice League movies, but let's say they didn't quite charge us up in the same way that Endgame did, right?
Yeah, The Flash attempted to try to wrap up not only DCEU, but bring in other universes of films,
right?
Which was not successful, and
right.
Kind of, which is, now that I say it's kind of relevant to some of the discourse around Suicide Kill the Justice League, because, a lot of the things that the Flash movie did when it came to the end movie cameos of dead actors, some of the discourse around the video game is how it uses or misuses Kevin Conroy. I've been reading. So.
Oh, yes. Okay. So. Yeah, how shall we approach this? So it's we'll get to
we'll spoil the game. We'll just say up front, we'll spoil the story of the game in this conversation.
Yes, this is going to be very spoilery. So if you're the person who's playing Kill the Justice League and don't want to get all the story spoilers, stop here, bookmark this podcast, and come back to it later.
Can I say this one? And I have.
Oh wait, we haven't stopped yet. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll give the big shout out when we're officially okay.
Yeah. I have not even watched the cutscenes which you've told me to do, which because I pulled them up on YouTube and they were like 3.5 hours long. So I said, no, thank you.
Well, it's a 3.5 hour long movie. How about that?
I
But
guess
go on.
so, but I did read the synopsis, so I know, and I've been reading some of the discourse, and my brain feels mushier because of it. Thank you very much.
Okay, yes, it's a mushy discourse. And okay, sorry. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is a great game and is kind of like Avengers Endgame for DC. That's what I'll argue. Okay, that's the end of the general. Spoilers start now.
You're also
Um,
like the only like the third person in the world apparently who feels this way. Because
yeah,
been reading
well,
again and reading the discourse, everybody from the most progressive to the most reactionary conservative hates this game apparently.
yeah, and I don't know if that's just me, like I'm a weirdo or something, but I mean, we all have those things that we really like that no one else seems to like. Do you have one of those? Like for me, it's
Oh
like
yeah.
the Spike Lee movie Girl Six is critically panned, but I think it's a great movie.
I
Stuff like
like
that.
G.I. Joe Retaliation. Apparently nobody else likes that movie.
Yeah, that's an outlier. I like G.I. Joe Retaliation a little bit, but yeah, that's I think that applies. All right. Well, just so we get all the players involved, I'm gonna refresh on the discourse about Suicide Squad Guild of Justice League coming up to it. They announced it like 3 years ago or whatever. The pandemic was still happening at DC Fandom. So everyone was just like, well, we don't know what's going on. There's a million projects. We don't know if they'll ever come out. But it had great ambition from the premise. They started to leak out little trailers over the years, and it became clear it's a live service game. So stay with
What does that
me.
mean? Because I've been reading that in a lot of the discourse. What does live service game mean for us video game noobs?
Okay, well, essentially it means it's a game like I don't play them in it, so forgive me if I use the wrong it's sort of like Destiny or okay, it's a game where you're online all the time
Mhm.
and uh Marvel's Avengers tried to do this. And it says it has a solo mission and you complete that mission. And when you're done with that mission, the idea is you keep playing with friends online and you keep perhaps buying or getting new gear and
Ad
cosmetics
infinitum.
ad infinitum. They keep offering it to you through various promotions and you'll keep grinding to get these things. The idea of and that's like the money model. And in theory, like they also keep adding content, so like then the game never dies. That's the idea. Live service. There's a it will you can keep playing online with your friends, and they will keep giving you new stuff. In theory, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
As opposed to you buy the game once and then you
Right.
finish it
Which
and then
is
buy another
how
game.
I've experienced video games being again, we talked about last week. I only experience video games through the sports and they just give you a new copy every year
Right. So they have a different
rather than
model.
just do the downloadable content where you can update the rosters
Yeah.
forever and ever.
The thing people rightly complain about with like live service games is it is a bit of like a continuous, you know, uh, bait and drag, for essentially cosmetic add-ons. That's what mainly people are getting, a new costume. So I can play the same mission in a new costume.
Mhm.
And it goes on forever. And so because they have to keep giving you new ideas of things to upgrade, there's these incredibly fussy, like customize your weapons menu, which are like, there's like 800 different versions of how to get basically the same submachine gun. And they think maybe you want like, 10 new versions of it, blah, blah, blah. And so obviously some people like this, and a lot of people are like, this is a freaking drag. And at one point, the Suicide Squad game looked like it was going to be this because the previews were all like, guess what? You can customize your submachine gun any way you want. And the DC fan in me is like, guess what? I don't give a shit if King Shark can customize a fucking submachine gun. That has zero pull to me into whether I'm going to play this game or not. But maybe that's more for the gamer side or people who like live service games. Okay, so is that, and then, uh, and there was also just the general feeling of Rocksteady was made its fame by making these excellent Batman games. And does this game have Batman in it or not? Because I love Batman. And again, the open question of do people even really like the Suicide Squad?
Mhm.
So for in a way, so people are like skeptical for those reasons. Me, because I like the Suicide Squad, I'm like, yes, pivot and do a game that is focused on the Suicide Squad, but has all the Justice League members. That's crazy. Okay. So
So
anyway,
just to interject a little bit,
yeah.
again, these are my discourse annotations because I
Okay.
think some of the grievances folks have had is that because you're playing the Suicide Squad, and this is taking place in that Arkham universe that those original Batman games exist in.
Yes.
A lot of fans, from what I've read, again, just this is just me, outsider, observing the discourse, are upset that the game, even though it's called Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, you kill the Justice League, and people don't like that apparently. Like
Yes.
they really feel upset that you shoot Batman in the head and that you murder Superman and all that stuff. So
Yes, and we get that. We
kind of
get,
title
I
of
mean,
the
sort
game
of.
though.
It's in the title of the game. And that's why, again, that's why this isn't, it's not a one-to-one that this is like Endgame. Here, the endgame is you do actually kill the Justice League. Let's get that straight. If you play this game to completion, you will have murdered most of the Justice League. That's why I think this game is punk rock and not like pop rock.
Right.
Okay. However, given that, the way they get the story to reach that point is, to me, incredibly emotionally affecting and reminiscent of how they got the sort of gang all comes together feeling in Endgame, which I agree with you was a thing we're missing from the DC universe on the movie side. So, and I'll say, so I was surprised by this. I was one of the skeptics who was like, I don't know. I like this game. And again, video game references, because we had come out of two similar games, superhero team games, which were supposed to be live service and just weren't that good. These are Marvel's Avengers, which I don't know if anyone even talks about today, and Gotham Knights. Sort of related to the whole concept, but and they were so cool in concept. You can play as any of the Avengers. You can play as the whole Bat family. Cool in concept. They didn't have a soul and just kind of died on the vine.
Different studio though, right?
Yeah, different studios, different studios. Yeah, it gets complex with the whole like who owns what, license and whatnot. But like, yeah, Gotham Knights is not by Rocksteady, even though they started the Arkham Knights thing. So it's confusing. But yeah, there's three prime Rocksteady Batman games, and then there's Arkham Origins and Gotham Knights, which are similar but not by the same studio. Okay.
But for the casual layman gamer, they don't necessarily know that.
True,
Because it
absolutely.
looks like, the aesthetic at least looks like it should be part of the Arkham games. And
Yeah,
in
yeah.
fact, learning that Arkham Origins and Gotham Knights are not part of the Arkham universe is something that just happened right now. I didn't know that.
Well, good. I mean, I hope you get some arcane video game knowledge out of this, if nothing else. I mean, you can't play NBA 2K your whole life, man. It's 2024. Okay, anyway, so the
What's worse, I play Retro Bowl on my phone. That's the only video game I play.
Niners. We'll get to that later. Anyway, yeah, so yes, the casual gamer could easily buy Gotham Knights and think, what's this whole Arkham thing? What's the fuzz about? This game is like, okay, it's not great. But I'm gonna contend that Rocksteady is on another level. And I mean, I don't even know where to start. By the way, I wrote a long piece on this.
Yeah, we'll link to it in
Yeah,
the description.
We'll link to it, and Tara Strong shared it on this. Tara
The
Strong
voice of Harley Quinn.
plays Harley Quinn. So the critical discourse is still an open question. Reviews are still coming out. Among them are mine. Well, so yeah, I guess let's just get to the killing the Justice League thing and talk about that. Which one would you like me to spoil
Well,
first?
I mean, I think not necessarily the specific ones, but you've talked about in your first impressions review and in your extended review about how the game, like we don't need to dig into the gameplay and all of like the customization, all that. You were really affected by the performances. Like you mentioned earlier, like watch the cutscenes, it's like watching a movie.
Yeah.
You're really affected by the performances and the storytelling more so than even just like how the mechanics of the game operate. So I want you to talk about what was so compelling about the way the story plays out when it's essentially like you know there is a world where this, you know, you kind of tie it to the DCU. There's a world where this is the third in the trilogy of the Suicide Squad movies, right? Because
Yes.
you have the James Ayer one, the James Gunn one, the David Ayer one, the James Gunn
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
now this video game one. You know, you could imagine a world where this completes that trilogy too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That's one way of looking at it. True. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So I'll talk about two main scenes that really emotionally affected me in the end game way. And this is going to be super spoilery. Officially,
Yeah,
this is
people are
super
already warned.
spoilery.
They've already stopped listening. Let's be
Yeah.
honest.
Are you ready, Keith? Because I'm
Yeah.
spoiling you.
I've
Okay.
I've read the plot synopsis.
You read the
So I
plot
know what happens.
Okay, so there's a scene about halfway, two-thirds of the way through the game where uh the okay, Wonder Woman starts fighting Superman. Superman's been brain controlled by Brainiac.
Wonder Woman's the
So
only one who's not.
yes, Wonder Woman's the only one who's not mind controlled by Brainiac. So she's been helping out the squad reluctantly because she hates them too. So Wonder Woman's on a mission of her own here. Um, and she's wonderfully played by the voice actor, wonderfully rendered, and all this stuff. Harley has a little crush on her, so there's some like significant queer content thing going on. Um, Wonder Woman and Superman are beating the shit out of each other across Metropolis, basically. They're like smashing each other through buildings. Buildings are falling down. It's great. You know, like sort of like the Man of Steel fight. Your mission on the video game side is Amanda Waller has been wounded and they need to get back to the Hall of Justice to evac her, basically. So it's like a convoy type mission where her car is trying to drive through the streets of Metropolis, and the Suicide Squad provides her cover while the aliens are trying to blow her up. While Wonder Woman and Superman are beating the shit out of each other. So all this shit is happening. Okay, but let's say you complete the mission and get back to Hall of Justice. Everyone's kind of crashed into the front steps of the Hall of Justice. Waller's complaining because she's a huge bitch about the. I mean that in a sense like her character's a huge bitch consistently through the whole game. He's like, get me inside and get my leg looked at or whatever. And the Suicide Squad is assembling on the front steps of the battered Hall of Justice, and Wonder Woman and Superman crash into there. And there's a long, long scene where they fight, and it's real cool. It's how you kind of imagine a Wonder Woman Superman fight would be. And Wonder Woman gets the upper hand for a little bit, and then she doesn't, and Superman destroys her. And it's not graphic like gory, it's just extreme if you care about these characters as we do. He basically heat visions her until she is reduced to a puddle of clay, which is her canonical beginning, right? So yeah, so it's a big moment. And on the side of this moment, giving you the audience POV is Harley Quinn, who has had a little crush on Wonder Woman this whole time. And they try to intervene as one does in the endgame scene, like the backup. They try to be her backup, but they can't do anything because it's Superman.
Mm-hmm.
So they sort of feebly try to be her backup, and then they have to hang back because they can't do anything against Superman. And they have to watch as Superman kills Wonder Woman. So that's one. So that was the scene that I was like, oh, holy crap, this is the DC movie I wanted to watch all
Not
these
that you wanted to
years.
see Wonder Woman die
No,
in
no,
the
no,
movie.
no, not that specific thing, but you know what I mean? Like the level of, again,
Emotion and
yeah, again,
character.
when they decided that Black Widow would be basically refrigerated for the sake of the other Avengers' emotional growth in Endgame, they made that choice. They did it. We can argue about whether it's fridging or not, but it gave that thing a whole lift, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, but the cool thing about how this affects the arc of the gameplay is, you know, up to that point, we've been sort of messing around with, oh, we'll use this weird Sinestro ring to try to deal with the Green Lantern problem. You know, they're getting bespoke items to try to deal with the impossible task of fighting the Justice League, and they're reluctant to do it. For me, after that scene, it changes from I don't really want to be fighting the Justice League to Harley, goes like, well, Harley becomes like, yeah, now we got to get Superman. That guy's got to be got because he fucking killed Wonder Woman. And
The
that's
emotional
deep.
crux of the
Yeah,
game.
that's fucking deep because you go into the Superman fight with a changed attitude of not like this is going to be really hard, but rather we got to do this one for Wonder Woman. Um,
So
and
that's one, and I'm glad you brought that up because it does sound like a very emotional, and maybe I will watch the cutscene because it does sound like an emotional performance. I will go into the other death that has become, like I said, talking points on the internet, and that's the death of Batman,
mm,
because uh I alluded to earlier, one of the complaints about the way Batman is killed in the game is that it's Kevin Conroy's apparently final performance as at least the Arkham Batman. It's not his final vocal performance.
yeah,
'Cause I think he's going to be in a couple other animated things and maybe another game or so, but it's his last go around as that version of Batman because, as you mentioned, the Arkham games are iconic and meaningful to a lot of people. So, long story short, they defeat Batman after you fight him in a couple boss rounds.
hmm
The cutscene is basically he's kind of, I don't know if he's tied up, but he's
He's
you know
on a bench. He's
right,
on a
but he's
bench,
defeated.
incapacitated. Yes,
He's
he's
defeated,
defeated.
and he's got some verbal jabs left, but nothing physical.
Yeah,
And Harley just basically puts a gun to his head and shoots him kind of unceremoniously, and that's how he dies. Which again, in the context of the story, probably makes sense. There are several Batman fans or just several video game fans who don't like that, who say it's a cheap way to honor, like you should respect the memory of Kevin Conroy more. It's just weird kind of
yeah,
discourse around that particular scene. Again, you're going into this game knowing you're killing the Justice League, and Batman's not, he's probably like the sixth leaguer to die in the game.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not a
yeah,
surprise that he's
yeah.
gonna die, right? So I just think it's a weird argument that people are like, you know, and I mentioned the reactionary right wing misogynists are using that as example of, the quote unquote strong female character because they get Harley Quinn's the one who pulls the trigger,
Right,
which
right.
again is all the worst parts of the internet are coming together to kind of shit on that part of the game. What say you around how Batman meets his end in the game?
I think it's wonderful. And again, yes,
Well, and you hate
all
Batman. Let's be real.
shut up. I do not hate Batman. What,
Cancel Dominic. No, I'm just
yo, I've played all the Arkham games.
kidding.
Have you even played the Arkham games,
I
bro?
can't even get through the first one. So yeah,
So who's the Batman fan
exactly.
on that level?
I relinquish.
I no, I would say if you're a true Batman fan, you have to play the Arkham games. Not that I'm telling you what to do, but that's my argument because the Arkham games are some of the best Batman shit
Well, but I
ever.
think, and that's where some of that like anger comes from, maybe, or some of that, just the bad feeling. Because again, to your point, these Arkham games were foundational for a lot of people,
Yeah, yeah.
and to see like that's how that person goes out. Again, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like these are all fictional. You know what I'm
Right. It's
saying?
kind
Like
of I
it's
was
just
thinking,
weird they have this kind of parasocial relationship with a fictional character that you get that upset.
yeah, yeah,
He
no.
didn't die the way you think he should have died.
I was thinking and by the way, he also dies in Gotham Knights, so it just happens that Gotham Knights wasn't as popular. So, okay,
Yeah.
Batman dies all the time. I was kind of thinking of like the No Time to Die, because a
Yeah.
lot of James Bond fans were just upset like you can't kill James Bond like that, and I get that. So I understand where that comes from. But again, yes, fictional character. And by the way, if you've even read the comics, you know that Batman dies now and then and he comes back and there's like 12 of him. Okay?
Well, and then there's actually a whole
Yeah.
multiverse twist to this whole game.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the League
Exactly.
lives somewhere. So
Yeah,
it's
and it's
not like,
still open. Yeah, the added content for the game will be these Elseworlds, where, as we know, any shit can happen. On that specific scene, Batman's on a bench. They're laying a trap for Superman using Batman as the bait. Clever. And yeah, it's shorthand to say Harley kills Batman. She does that, but first they talk. And the scene, which is extraordinary, I'm gonna go revisit it to make sure, but it's really well written. And it's kind of like, I should say something like The Killing Joke, or just like if when Harley actually just sums up her whole case of her whole life dealing with this fucking Batman guy. And Batman has a few words to say about the fact that the end of his life is he's been controlled by Brainiac and he's basically lost everything he ever fought for, right? Because he's just an alien stooge at the end of his life. And so I won't even try to paraphrase because the Harley monologue essentially or manifesto where she kind of lays it all out because remember she's a trained mental health person, so she's always
Psychologist, right?
yeah, she's always using psychiatry and or psychobabble and then analyzing everything, so she's very like cogent of things. So she talks about it. She talks about the whole thing, me putting you locking us up all the time. We go out and
We should remember Joker is dead in this universe already. He died in one of the Arkham games, right?
yes, and he's coming back as a playable character. So again, you fucking guys who are worried because Batman died, do you even read comics? Joker died. He's coming back as a playable character in this game. You like that? I think you do. Okay, Batman's going to come back in some way or other. You might not be able to play him because it's from the Suicide Squad's point of view, but do not get in a twist about like he died. That's like,
Well, but you know, and I think that's another complaint, right? Because people, when there was word that there was going to be another game in the Arkham universe, I think there were rumors like maybe it's a Superman game, maybe it's a
right,
Justice League game,
there were those rumors.
and so like as is the usual in a lot of fan circles, people are more pissed off about what they didn't get versus what's there.
Yeah,
So some of this anger, I think, is stemmed from, well, I'd rather play as Batman or play as the Justice League. Like, I didn't want to play as the Suicide Squad. You know what I mean? I think there's
yeah,
some of that no one promised you that this was going to be a Justice League game or,
right, right,
so, but I think that's where some of this anger comes from. Like, they probably would have preferred if this was Arkham 4 and you're
right,
Batman taking out the Justice League rather than the Batman being one of the bosses you have.
right. And again, both and we're not saying Arkham 4 is never going to happen. But yes, that's a very important level of that. I'm glad you brought it to that because that's about the game experience level, which is unique to the video game space. Who do you get to play as? Do I want to play the game and get to play as these people? And that's a really important thing on a very basic level. I'll just lay it out. Most games, you get to play as the white dude hero whenever you want. There are very few games where you get to play as the woman or the black guy. Relatively few. It's changing, but it's still it's still very biased towards the most popular playable character we assume is Batman slash the big white alpha dude. I'm in the other camp, and there's a camp of these people, which video game industry you should be paying attention to. You are. We want to play as the woman. We want to play as the guy who's not the white alpha guy. We might want to play as the weakest possible guy so we can have the experience of leveling up and indulging the fantasy of becoming powerful. I wanted to play as Harley, and I did, and it was amazing. Harley is briefly playable in Arkham Knight. And one of the great things about Arkham Knight is in the expansions, they allowed you to play as Batgirl or Harley Quinn. And they built that out for this game. So, again, there are 19 games you can play as Batman. There's 2 or 3 games where you can be Harley Quinn. And that's just the math right now. But this game makes a really strong argument. If you can get over yourself, you might just like playing as Harley Quinn. You might like playing as Black Deadshot. You might, I'll explain the context of that in a minute. But you might like playing as King Shark. And yeah, there's one guy on the team who's Captain Boomerang, who is more typical mold of like a white aggro guy. And you can play as him too. I don't have to like Captain Boomerang, but you can play. It's not like there is no option to play as the tough white dude.
Well, so I mean, this is a good route to go down too, because like I said, I alluded to earlier, some of the reactions to the game is coming from a very particular space in fandom where, and we see this with Star Wars, we see this with Masters of the Universe, we see this anytime the focus is on the female character.
Yeah, absolutely.
That there's like the misogyny just kind of comes out, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's also part of where, because Harley Quinn is the main character in this game essentially, which, Harley Quinn has been like, she's the second most popular DC character after Batman anyway, just like
Yeah.
the last 10-20 years. It's Batman and Harley Quinn. Like those are that's why there had been 3 movies featuring Harley Quinn. That's 3 more than like a lot of DC characters have never been
Yeah, so
featured in anything.
yeah, so like
That's not a surprise.
objectively as a critic of pop culture and observer of pop culture, you think back is like, what's the big issue? Harley Quinn is obviously a lot of people's favorites. Like obviously. But you get back the whole thing of like, but if it's got to be guys. Anyway, what else I had another.
Well, I know you've been on social media talking about that this takes inspiration from the films in the sense that Deadshot is portrayed as a black man, which was first done in the David Ayer movie when Will Smith was cast
Yeah.
as Deadshot, and no other version of Deadshot has ever been portrayed as an African American. But you said that the game actually takes it further than the movie even does, right?
Yeah. And okay, and let me clarify. I was trying to confirm this as a DC guy. To your knowledge, I think this is right. I think this is right. Deadshot was first a black guy in the movie, the first Suicide Squad movie, because Will Smith wanted to play him and not the role he was originally offered. So they're like, okay, Will Smith, you get to choose who you want to play. And that was the first time Deadshot was a black guy. And they didn't convert him in the comics, unlike other situations. Like Nick
Marvel
Fury.
does, basically.
Yeah,
Marvel
yeah.
changes their...
Yeah, Nick Fury.
They changed their comics character to reflect the movies. DC, they don't give a shit about the movies because the movies are never like the biggest difference between DC and Marvel is that Marvel kind of like tries to have this like unified theory thing where everything needs to be the same, where DC doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, exactly. So
because the DC movies aren't even thought out in advance to even know what the next thing's gonna be.
Right.
So
right, that's one problem. Yeah, and also let's be fair, Deadshot isn't a big deal character. He's not top tier. He's just
and he's not even been adapted that many times. Like other than his appearance in the Suicide Squad movie, not the Suicide Squad, the lowercase d. Anyway, that one trend I hope goes away is putting the in front of your character and then thinking that's a new film.
Yes, that's true. That
he was only ever adapted once in the Arrowverse.
Oh, okay.
Once, maybe was there a Smallville version of Deadshot? I feel like there might have been a Smallville version.
There might have been,
but yeah, he's not like to your point a character that's been adapted that many times anyway. Yeah. So
usually he's a white guy named Floyd Lawton who is kind of nihilistic and has a death wish, and he's a very well written character. So because he wasn't converted in the other mediums, Black Deadshot has only been that Will Smith version, and now here basically. And so here he's voiced by an actor, I think his name is Bumper Robinson, and he's definitely a black man. And he has sort of the same storyline as in Suicide Squad movie 1, which is like he's an assassin, but he loves his daughter. So somebody's got a heart of gold. So, which to me is kind of stock, but
that's also, but to your point, that's not part of his character in the comics at all. That's very much an invention of the movies.
Right. So that brings up that question, like white Deadshot in the comics is doing fine being completely nihilistic and not loving nobody.
He's kind of like Bullseye. His whole thing is like, I don't miss. That's just his thing.
Right. That's his main thing. So like, would you even want to like convert that into the black guy character? Maybe not, but the point is they didn't. So okay, so Black Man Deadshot has some of the nihilistic quality. He still has a daughter somewhere that he's supposedly doing all this work for. And the way they set it up in the game is, it's funny because you think of who's Deadshot's natural foil. We don't know, but he's
a Batman villain, right? Like
yes, he's a Batman villain. But Batman has her thing with Harley. So the way they set it up in the game is Deadshot's main foil is Green Lantern, John Stewart Green Lantern.
That's interesting.
It is interesting because it's a choice. It's a mood. It gives all those things. And because, again, talking about race bending and race swapping and stuff, and this is not actually real. I mean, John Stewart is a Green Lantern. It wasn't race swapped. He's just the second guy, the second Earth Green Lantern. Correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, right?
Well, technically third, because Alan Scott was the first Green Lantern. But
thank you. Whatever. Technically, he's the third Earth Green Lantern. He got it after Hal Jordan. He's a black guy, architect, ex-military, all this stuff. He also
and
is
also the main Green Lantern for a whole generation of fans who only watched the Justice League animated series,
absolutely right.
which is wild that he's never been put in any of the films because I mean probably two generations of people only know John Stewart as the Green Lantern, not Hal Jordan or Kyle Rayner or the various other
Yeah. Nothing wrong with
Lanterns
Jessica Cruz,
Green.
by the way. I'm a fan of Jessica Cruz, but yeah, more on that Green Lantern digression later. The point is here, it's basically, it's two black dudes having a beef with each other, and that's one of the stories in this intertwined story type game. And Green Lantern is on the side of evil because he's been mind controlled by Brainiac. And as we know about Green Lanterns, he's very hard because Green Lantern is a lot. He just thinks up an army of helicopters and they appear and start shooting at you. So it's a good like David and Goliath dynamic because Deadshot is just a guy with some guns.
Yeah. I think the main takeaway, like I'm interested in, is that where you are as far as like we said on the critics meter, you're definitely pro this game. In fact, like the way you talk about this game, it's like it's one of the best games you've ever played.
Yeah, yes,
And it's
it is.
what I just find so fascinating is that like the consensus seems to be the opposite, which I just wonder how do you square that circle? Why do so many people? We already talked about some of the reasons people don't like the game,
Yeah,
but like you've mentioned too that like when you look at the landscape, not that many positive reviews for this game, mostly negative. But you sit into like this is one of the greatest of all time. Like, how do you square that? Like, what is other than you're a weirdo? Why do you think this moved you so much where it turns so many other people off and across the political spectrum? So it's not just like
yeah.
the aggro fanboys who are mad that there's a girl in it. It's like a lot of people don't like this game. So I'm just curious what was it specifically that like affected you so much about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, so many things. The big sequence I talked about with Wonder Woman, Superman, basically all the confrontations with the Justice League bosses revealed something to me. And I'm saying that as a DC fan. So to address the point of why this consensus, again, as of now, I think this consensus is going to change over time. There are all these things with the ways that reviews were allowed or not reviewed. So sort of
Some like people are just pissed about the fact they didn't get a review copy.
exactly the most popular outlets for video game reviews did not get an advanced review copy. And I'll mention freely, we are not the most popular outlet for video game reviews, but we're working on it. We have a certain perspective on it.
Yeah.
But the most standard ones didn't get a review copy early, and they're used to getting it. They maybe feel a little entitled to it, so maybe they were a little salty they didn't get one.
That's
Again,
possible.
I think this is slightly intentional by Rocksteady being a little punk rock and knowing what they were doing, but we can get to that. So yeah, the first wave of reviews were all pissed, and this isn't that great. Some of them are tentatively like, this is better than I thought, and I'm like, does that mean it's good? Will you admit that it's good? I don't know. I was in the camp of love the premise, saw the other trailers, and I started to get skeptical. When the game arrived, I was in the camp of I don't know if this will be good. I completely changed my mind because of the writing.
I was
Not
so that's where I was actually going with that question because I think again taking out all of the bad faith arguments about the game,
okay.
some of the negative reviews have been about the gameplay, the mechanics, the this and the that, the stuff that's just tied to like the technical aspects of playing a video game, Suicide Squad or not. Just like this thing sucked and that thing sucked and pushing this button, I don't like this button.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think why you fall so far on the other side is you are yourself a screenwriter. You are a writer. And
Yeah.
I think the storytelling, maybe there are some things like that are persnickety about the gameplay that you would even say is your favorite. But you were affected by the story, the performances, the way the writing, and I think that ultimately trumps the but you had to push X and Y. And I'm not saying that, you know what
Right.
I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
but
Right.
you should just have to push the trigger. But you know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah, yeah.
that's where some of the like the boss fights are repetitive or whatever. Like, you don't care about that. You care about you cried when Wonder Woman died.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
no.
the
And
acting was so good and the
I care about that.
performance was
Don't
so
get me
good.
wrong. But yes, my cocktail makeup is like I'm 40% interested in the gameplay stuff, but I'm 60% interested in
Right.
the story stuff. Because I play mainly all the superhero games and I don't play all the games. I play
Mhm.
mainly the superhero games. And to me, the gameplay is really good. It's not the best. If you're
Sure.
just going on the gameplay level, you are right. It's not the best ever. The story, however, is the best ever, and it's written wonderfully. And hopefully, I will get to do an interview with one of the people on the writing staff at some point. And because I believe she's taking some flack from the weirdos right now. So stay strong, Allie. We're we're gonna change the needle on this point.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like the hope, right? Like part of why we wanted to do this podcast, why you've been writing what you've been writing, is that I think it's not to be contrarian, but I think it is good to have the other perspectives. I mean, that's the whole point, it's the whole premise of Nerds of Color, right? Like
Yeah,
pop culture with a different perspective. And particularly when things become so kind of, like I said, consensus on one side,
yeah,
it's good to have this other angle and other
yeah.
perspectives to
I
look at
mean,
it.
and it's also a test of what is a DC fan? Like I can pose that question to you. Like this made me think like I appreciate this because I'm a DC fan. I'm getting a lot of jokes that no non-DC fans are not going to get, and I love them.
You know, it's the same boat. That's an excellent point. This is the same argument that happened when Teen Titans Go came out.
Okay.
You know, like that's that kids cartoon on Cartoon Network where you have like these chibi versions of the Teen Titans.
Mm-hmm.
And when it first debuted, there was a again, it's almost like a carbon copy of this discourse around the
Huh.
game because there was a beloved animated series in the late 90s, early 2000s called the Teen Titans. Coincidentally, Tara Strong plays Raven in that, and she plays Harley Quinn here.
Mm. Oh,
But
okay, cool.
that animated series was a more serious kind of like, you know, in the mode of like the Batman the animated series, like take on the Teen Titans. And then so when word that there was going to be a new version of the Teen Titans with the same actors all reprising their roles, fans were excited. Oh, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like we get to come back. I love this cartoon when I was a kid, and I get to. And then when it came out, it was a satire.
Mm.
It was jokey. Like I said, they were like chibi versions of their Teen Titans selves, and people were pissed.
Mm.
You're cheapening the memory of these characters.
Mm.
You're doing this, you're doing that. But then like that series, to your point about like has a legacy of its own now. The people have come around on it. I mean, there's still people who hate it, but it was that same argument. This isn't what I wanted.
Right. Right.
I'm not going to critique it on its own merits. I'm going to critique it based on what I didn't get.
Right.
Because if you critique it on its own merits, it's one of the most DC things ever. Because a lot of
Ah.
the references that they do on the show, you only get if you're a DC fan. Like
Y-
the target audience, you know, the like 8-year-olds who are watching it probably don't even. It's like the classic Looney Tunes. When we
Yeah.
were kids watching Looney Tunes, there were jokes our parents would get that we didn't get
Oh,
until
totally,
30
totally.
years later.
Yeah.
You know
Right.
what I mean? Then we watch an old Looney Tunes
Yeah.
and go, "Oh, that's what he meant." That's what's happening with Teen Titans, right? It's like
Yeah.
there were a lot of jokes that little kids didn't get. As the kids get older, they'll get them, and as the kids become DC fans, they'll really get them.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I
Totally.
mean? And I think that's kind of what you're saying here.
Yeah, no, I am. For me, the Suicide Squad game is so DC heavy. My main like wonderment is just like it really feels like someone over in Rocksteady Studios read all the comics, and I just think that's a weird foreign concept to me. Like I'm used to like the director or whatever going, I'm sort of familiar with the source material. The Suicide Squad game feels like everyone in that building read all the comics and we're just looking for ways to squeeze in a reference to Killer Moth or some obscure shit just for its own sake. And I think that's punk rock too. I wanted to say, I don't know if I'll have time to get to it in this discussion, but I just wanted to, based on what you said, it's an interesting question what you just said about nostalgia as it relates to generations and age, because, you know, typical, we've been doing this superhero movie thing for a while now, right? And you and I are a little older, we're like Generation X or whatever. So we would always play the card of, I remember it this way, right?
Yeah.
So my feelings are based on how I remember it. Lately, I notice, oh, wait, there's a slightly younger generation that is now doing the same thing, but with a different generation of reference points, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the Star Wars dilemma.
Right.
Our Star Wars, our nostalgia was the original series. So
Sure.
when the prequels came out, we were of the age, we were the asshole age when the prequels came out,
Sure.
right? And
Sure.
so this wasn't my Star Wars, and we just shit on it constantly,
Sure.
forgetting that there was a whole generation of children going to see episodes 1 through 3, loving it. In fact,
Yeah.
our co-host Brittany loves
Sure.
her some
Good
prequels,
example.
right?
Good example. Yeah.
And it took me, I won't speak for you, but it took me several years to not, I still don't love them, but I don't hate them. Like
Yeah.
I had the vitriol. If social media existed in 1999 or 2002, I would be some of them toxic fans now who are just constantly shit
Right.
on the sequels, right? So like now there are people who hate the Star Wars sequels because they're not the prequels,
Right.
you know?
Because they're like their emotional place is like, those are my prequels and you did something to them.
Right. Right.
And we're weirdly like, those weren't my prequels and you still did something
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the double
Yeah.
hate comes from
But yeah,
people
and so in
arguing.
this case, there are a lot of things like, so let's say generation two of nostalgia, we'll probably talk about like millennial kids, or, millennial youngish adults who are like, I watched cartoons in the 90s and that's my reference point. So when you do something new and mess with it, I'm comparing it to my feeling about those cartoons in the 90s,
Right.
which I didn't watch a ton of. I watched some of them, but I don't have that thing about the old X-Men cartoon
Right.
or the old Teen Titans cartoon. So hopefully that's a thing that, well, that will not get fixed, but we can talk about it and
I
tease
mean,
out what
I
the
also
problem
wonder
is.
too, like nostalgia seems to be I wonder if nostalgia even matters as much to like newer generations anyway. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
it's
I think it does to the level that when it gets violated, they get angry on the
sure.
internet. That's the thing. Like
Yeah.
we're at the point we've passed over our wave of fury. Like imagine, thought experiment, if Twitter existed when the Star Wars prequels came out,
Yeah.
the kind of discourse there would have been.
Oh, it would suck. I mean, I joke about
By
as a,
people, by us.
yeah, no, first that's what I mean. We were those toxic fans because we were in our 20s.
Yeah.
Should have like let the shit go because realized it's for little kids. But we
Yeah.
were like, no, the Star Wars is supposed to be this way.
Right.
And then we didn't get what we wanted. Meanwhile, again, there were kids who were like, I like this
Yeah.
twisty lightsaber guy, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And then they're the ones who grew up 20 years later and talk about like that's why the show Ahsoka spoke to them so much because it was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is what I've always wanted. And to me, I was like, that's great. And then there are a lot of people who are like, well, that's not, you know what I mean? Like you're shitting
Yeah.
on my. So I think that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to fandoms in particular, because any fandom of anything, not just pop culture stuff, any music, whatever, like what you liked at 12 is fused into your brain.
Absolutely.
And then it can
Whenever
never
you were
be
12, that's the problem.
exactly.
Everyone's 12 at a different time.
Whenever, right, well, that's what I mean. Whenever you were
Right.
12, whatever was the pop culture thing you liked at 12 is fused into your brain irrevocably. And if it strays a millimeter from what you remember at 12, you either accept
Right.
or react with fury, which I think
Right.
social media just exacerbates.
And as a function of the time we're living in right now, it's really easy for even a 12-year-old or a 22-year-old to just jump on and go, this is horrible.
Yeah.
And
well, as a Batman fan, like we've dealt with this pre-internet because Michael Keaton getting cast in 1988.
Yeah, sure.
Was that if Twitter existed in 1988, Michael Keaton would probably be like assassinated.
Right.
And we went through
Yeah.
that with Heath Ledger in 2008, right? Like
Yeah.
Heath Ledger as the Joker, and again with time, that Michael Keaton version of the Batman became the nostalgia for people my age.
Yeah.
Right. So much so that like we forgive an atrocity of the Flash movie just because Michael Keaton's in it.
Right. So they're playing with the generational.
It's
demographics,
all full circle.
Right. And I also want to say quick notes, not advocating being on Twitter all the time because Twitter we may have lost that battlefield.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having this conversation on Blue Sky and Threads and some other places.
And we'll do the plugs at the end. Before we go, any final thoughts on the Suicide Squad, the discourse, everything else? Anything you didn't get out that you would like to get out now?
I think I summed up pretty well. I'd please refer you to my writings on it on the Nerds of Color site. Maybe we'll add some videos on this subject, but I just want to say that feeling when you're in the opening nights of Endgame in the theater, a few of us were lucky enough to have this experience when you're in the opening night in the crowd, that feeling when you're like, we're in trouble. Is anyone going to come to help? Is Cap going to die right here? That feeling was what I had while playing Suicide Squad. And I wasn't with anybody, but I was with my video game characters, and that's a proxy for having company.
Yeah.
And so that's why I make my argument that the Suicide Squad game is like DC's Endgame.
Yeah.
And whether we deserved it or not, or needed it or not,
Yeah.
that's debatable.
Yeah. Well, and again, we'll link out to both reviews in the description. Other than the Suicide Squad video game, is there anything else nerd popping for you this week, or is that kind of just dominated your life the entire?
Oh no, I'm quite busy with things. I will mention, and I'll give the full details on this in due time. We're doing a secret-ish cosplay musical project, and we're looking to crowdfund some funds for it. And
I know you got Gail Simone's attention.
yes, Gail Simone is a wonderful human being, and she presents that special problem of you kind of want to keep being on Twitter to hang out with Gail Simone. But you can also do it to agree on Blue Sky. So anyway, but yes, I asked for Gail Simone's blessing to record a song based on a scene from a comic she wrote in Secret Six involving Bane and Scandal Savage. She gave her non-binding, approval via Twitter. And I say non-binding because I don't want her to be like on the hook for
Right, because she doesn't own the copyright app, even though she
yes,
wrote it.
yeah, and she hasn't heard the song either, so she's not. But
Right, that too.
but you're right, those two things are big. But in principle, she said, okay, so we're going to record this song. The EP is not all superhero songs, but some of them are. And I have a Ko-Fi page or Coffee page, however you say that word. And hopefully we'll link to it somehow. Hopefully we'll link to it somehow. Look for Dom Ma and look for what he's trying to crowdfund related to Secret Six cosplay and music.
Yeah, that's awesome. My nerd pop is not nearly as awesome. I've been watching Mr. and Mrs. Smith on Amazon Prime.
Oh, what do you think about that?
I like it. I'm only 4 episodes deep. Again, this is another thing that I've seen a lot of discourse online where people absolutely hate this show. And I just can't fathom why. Donald Glover and Maya Erskine are like amazing. Like they just have the best chemistry.
They both have that not white thing going.
I think so. I think they're great.
Because if I'm not wrong, it was based on the movie that starred Jolie and Pitt.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Well, and I think so in name only, right? Because it's about spies who are married, quote unquote. But what I like about, again, I'm only halfway through. I haven't finished. There's 8 episodes. I'm 4 in. I think that might be part of the problem. Going back to the people are more upset about what they didn't get. This is not an adaptation of the movie, where the movie was very kind of like, because you can do things in a show you don't need to do in a movie. And what the show does, it focuses more on like the marriage aspect and less on the like action. You know what I mean? Like you might go in there thinking it's this action comedy in the vein of that Jolie Pitt movie, but it's more of like a kind of like a meditation on like married life.
Yeah.
And it's in a Donald Glover. It's written by Donald Glover, created by Donald Glover.
Oh, it was? I didn't realize.
Ira Marai directed the first few episodes.
Oh, for real? Oh,
so it's like it's got a very Atlanta vibe to it.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't.
And I think that's what people are. I think that's throws people off.
How do you say her name? Is it Erskine or Erskine?
I said Erskine. It could be Erskine.
Yeah. How is Maya Erskine in a sort of action?
No, she's great. That's what I mean. Like and I think, again, people maybe just aren't used to her. She's not the sexy, femme fatale type.
Yeah, she doesn't leap out at you as an action star either.
Right, which I think throws people off. But I think that's what makes it so compelling is that she is kind of like a normal person.
Okay.
That's thrust in these roles. Not to say there's no action. There's plenty of action interspersed, but it's not the main thing. You don't go to the show, thinking it's just going to be like explodey bombs going off.
Okay.
It's like, and when it happens, it's cool. But what's more interesting is that how do these two people who must pretend to be married, who have to live as a married couple, kind of deal with that? Yeah. To me, is the most interesting thing. And like the guest stars are amazing. Like they have like A-list guest stars. Like there's one episode where I feel like, did they just like shoot this during the Batman? Because like John Turturro and Paul Dano, who play the Riddler and Carmine Falcone in the Batman, are both in the episode.
Oh, for real? Oh,
yeah, at the same time. So it's like, did they just shoot this on their like break doing
right, totally. It's very possible. Sometimes
maybe, right? Colin Farrell's shooting the Penguin at the same time. So
well, that's great. I didn't know that about the Atlanta DNA, and I'm glad you said that because and I'll just say this because Donald Glover keeping up the Black person, Asian person relations. And it's Black History Month, and it's also going to be Lunar New Year.
Yeah.
And that's
Next
always
week.
been a funny thing in Discourse, just because of the dynamic of how you celebrate those two things at once among the two large groups who celebrate it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'd say, let's try to both end those two things this month, can't we?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
Well,
this,
it's interesting too that I think Maya was a replacement because originally when the show was first pitched, it was supposed to be Phoebe Waller-Bridge because they were just coming off of Solo, which they did together. Which
yeah,
I think would have been the dynamic would have been different if it was her. I'm
for
glad that they
sure.
switched it up and cast Maya, but yeah,
Okay.
and Maya's a Star Wars. Like they're still Star Wars because she was in Obi-Wan, I think.
Was
Yeah,
she?
she was
Okay.
like a very side character. It was like, why is Maya Erskine in this? But
Okay.
I'm glad she's blowing up, and I highly recommend it. I might change my mind when I watch the back half. So next week I'll tell you
Yeah, always a
if it lives up
possibility.
to the hype. But the first half is really, really good, and I like anything Donald Glover does too. So I feel like I'm kind of
Oh yeah, he's a great talent.
so. But yeah, so next week, I guess I just committed to podcasting next week, didn't I? It
well,
is it is the
are you
Super Bowl
are you a
and
Super Bowl fan or
Lunar New
not?
Year, so
And Lunar New Year and all those things, yeah.
I guess we'll be back next week.
Yeah, and for all we know, like some discourse might change on the all-powerful internets, telling us what
Yeah,
they're
trailers will
thinking
drop. Well, I'm
in that
playing the
point.
trailers are going to drop during the game, so we can
Oh
talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
that
yeah,
too. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, we'll probably
So
be back next week. So Hard Knock Life is returned
great.
in full force.
Yes.
Dominic, how can people find you and all of the things you got going on the internet?
Oh, I'm Dominic Ma at Dama DOMMAH on the Blue Sky Instagram, Twitter, etc. On Threads, I posted a thread that I really like, so please, get on Threads if you like that kind of thing. But it's basically DOMMAH, and somewhere out there is my Ko-Fi page for fundraising for this project, and we'll link to that too.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll talk more about that project as it starts
Yeah,
gaining steam.
it's gonna be cool. And Keith.
Yeah, find me at the real Chow on the thing called Twitter, though I'm rarely on it, and and I mostly just retweet bear shit now. So forgive me.
No, that's a play. It's appropriate for sports. That's still
Yeah, exactly, because we're also a sports podcast
right,
now.
right, right.
I'm also Real Keith Chow on Instagram. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color on all platforms, and go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all the podcasts. Please give us a rating and a review because I'm not sure if people even listen anymore. So I know we were off for a long time. If you are listening to this right now, go to our page and leave a review and write a comment just so that I know you're listening. Go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/nerds of color. We do publish lots of content on that.
Yeah.
So
Lots of good
keep that
content
up.
there.
Like I said, Dominic might be having some interviews in the near future that might be going up on YouTube
Yeah, we got good
with
stuff
the
there.
Suicide Squad folks. So anyway, that's it for Hard Knock Life this week, and I guess we'll be back next week. Until then, Dominic.
Niners and my Erskine.
Well, yeah, one thing that's got lost in the whole Super Bowl discourse around like how the right wing has adopted the San Francisco 49ers because they think the Chiefs is a psyop with Taylor Swift, who just won album of the year, which is all part of
funny.
this like CIA plot, I guess.
Yeah, and did she announce a new album too? Didn't
Yeah,
she?
she announced a new album with a crazy title, like the
Tortured Poets
Society or
which
something. It was like, come
which
on.
is a lot of
Yeah.
things. That's a beautiful title, especially if you're 18. But whatever, I won't
Yeah,
go into
exactly.
there.
She knows her audience.
Yeah,
But anyway, the irony of all of this is that the Kansas City Chiefs is still a fucking racist team. Like they still have the Indian logo.
They have the
They
most
still
questionable.
do that racist tomahawk chop
They
chant.
do that all the time. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just weird that like we have to root for them. I'm not rooting for them until they go the way of the Washington Commanders and change their name.
Right.
I'm not rooting for the Kansas
Let's
City
just root for what we actually root for. And well, I don't know. For me, it's
yeah. Honestly, I'm not rooting for
Niners.
anyone.
Yeah.
But it's just weird that the right wing has gotten themselves like twisted in knots.
Well, yeah, because they don't know what the fuck is going on. They just go to a situation. How do we start hate? But I don't really know what anyone stands for. So yeah.
Yeah, because I can't also in good faith root for the 49ers either. So that's why I have no dog in this fight.
So you'll watch the ads.
Yeah, I mean, this outro is going on way too long, but I think I will still root for the 49ers in the sense that it still plays into my Justin Fields narrative.
Right. Yes.
Because Caleb Williams is the Patrick Mahomes, and Brock Purdy and the built team is the direction I want to go. So I'm still.
Okay.
I guess you got me on your side for 1 week at least.
Hey, we'll see what happens, but fucking Niners. Okay.